Hi everyone, welcome to the Love Safety Net.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Steve. And today we are talking about the fourth pillar in the Love Safety Net workbook, which is your or our developmental gap work. And we all have gaps that we need to fill. And the developmental gap work chapter has a fantastic exercise in it called the Gap Finder exercise. And it's a very comprehensive list of all of the things that are potentially a gap in your life on just about every level. So it's very comprehensive. We don't expect, it's not a competition to see how many of those you have already filled and dealt with in your life, but it is a fantastic way in which you can analyze how you're going and what potentially might be a priority in your life to develop, but also you can do it by proxy for your partner or your children or anybody else. It's a great exercise to just run through and say, well, I'm strong in this area and maybe not so good in this area.
And it really isn't a competition, because it really is about how you work together as a couple or even as a family. There's about 5 spaces and you can make more to fill in for each of you. You shouldn't just fill it in for yourself.
Yeah.
Because straight away you're going to see what your blind spots are as a couple. And that's really, really important information for you to have. You and I, we both have a blind spot around saving money.
I wasn't going to say anything. Well, it's difficult. We both have an issue there. We both have to be mindful of that.
You'd saved a bit of money before I met you. I mean, we're not terrible. We're not terrible, but
could be better.
Yeah, could be better.
Developed.
And so obviously that can really create issues. And if you're not aware of it, but if you're aware of it, you can manage it. And that's what this is about. It's not actually about finger pointing and casting blame. Quite the opposite, because the really amazing thing that the Gap Finder does that people may not notice straight off is it's a really amazing tool for hunting down your false pride or your unhealthy ego or narcissism or whatever you want to call it, that we've been famous for talking about in the past. Love Safety Net workbook really kind of moves past that. It's really about the healthy foundation. So we don't talk a lot about narcissism and about codependence on this site, because this is really just about getting the healthy stuff in place. But I think it would be remiss to not mention that the Gap Finder is a really great way to help us all see our narcissism.
Yeah. Narcissism can be described as a product of groupthink. We've talked about that previously in the past as well. And groupthink is one very clear way in which we create gaps in our thinking. Because if we're all ready to take on board the prejudices and the bias that we hear from the other people in our community or from marketers or from the media, that is creating a gap in our thinking and a gap in our skill set. And so if we're not able to be aware of that, well, then we develop a narcissistic approach to life, because we've built over those gaps with error, with false thinking, and that groupthink is one way to describe that. And we are vulnerable and we are susceptible to falling into that groupthink and not thinking that we need to learn things that we haven't learnt yet. Because we're human. We think I don't need it. I've got a great example. I've been involved in customer service virtually all my life in various industries, and customer service is where I get to talk to a lot of people and do a little bit of my own private research there. But the thing is that a lot of people will say to me, I'll ask them for their email address, and they'll say, oh no, I don't have an email. No, I don't know anything about that computer stuff. Oh yeah, you've got to email it to my wife or to my husband or something like that. And I think, wow, what a gap that is, that you're not able to just organize yourself an email address. It's probably the simplest thing. And a lot of people think they can't figure out computers. Well, you press a button and then you click on a screen, and then you can read an email, you can set up an email. It's not hard. If you can read, you can set up an email. So there's a lot of gaps will appear that you won't think it's a gap, because a lot of people are very proud of the fact that they're not computer people. I think that was where I wanted to go with that. Just they think, oh well, no, I'm just not a computer person. I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like, work on my own car, and I just do things the old-fashioned way. And there's a lot of false pride in that. And I mean, that's just a glaring example from my world of customer service. But there are more examples of that. Our mindset is very... our mindset will play tricks on us. And we think that we won't need to fill those gaps. But of course you need an email address. The more we progress in society, the more crucial that you have a safe and secure email address, and you remember how to spell it. Things like that. So, okay, that's a bit of a glaring example from my industry, but when it comes to our families and our intimate relationships, those gaps can create big conflicts that we need to avoid.
And unfortunately, where we'll often tend to mask over things the most is when we have gaps that are really hurting us. That's kind of like, I think the narcissistic conundrum is, there's a glaring gap in our life of something that we should have learned but we didn't, or that we should have in place but we don't. And it kind of is so glaring, and it puts so much stress on us that instead of fessing up and being humble and saying, okay, well, I need to do something about this, we start confabulating and we start creating false realities to cover up that gap. So I'll give, for instance, for this, which is a very common one, is there's a lot of people who can't read, who you would never know that they couldn't read.
Yep.
For whatever reason, they weren't paying attention at school. And I mean, really, reading, you really, you don't learn to read well just from going to school. There's a lot of people out there that can't read, and are in all sorts of amazing jobs that you wouldn't expect that they could get themselves into without being able to read.
Right.
And the fact that they can't read is really embarrassing. So, that's just a good example of how a gap like that can turn into something where they start telling lies to cover up for it. They start using self-pity inside themselves of going, well, I didn't get the chance because of this and this and this, and poor me. And so this whole really quite evil and complex construct starts developing inside the person, where they've got a whole web of lies. There's other people that they blame. There's other ways they puff themselves up. There's ways that they shift responsibility. There's all these things that they do so that people won't find out. And this is where, I guess, as a demonstration, is where the gap finder can really just blow all that stuff really wide open.
Yeah, right.
But in a way where you're ready to also help yourself and help your family members. And I think one of the most important things about the gap finder and about this chapter is to really focus on the things that cause your partner stress. Don't go into the gap finder exercise going, oh, look at this, see, you're terrible at that.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I always hated about you, because you're so terrible
gloating.
at that.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Not good.
That's not going to build the kind of rapport, and that gets into challenging, which is something that you really need to learn how to do if you want to help your partner fill in those gaps, and because you want them filling in the gaps that they feel the most insecure about.
So you mean to challenge your partner to develop their own gaps, say, okay, we identify the gap, but hey, I bet you're very good at this. I bet you won't be able to do this, or I reckon if you put that, you could probably achieve this thing. So you're saying challenging in that way, finding ways to frame that as something that's positive or that has a challenge.
You get really nervous Like, I have to, I know when to stop now. Like, when I started trying to challenge you to do your bronze medallion and surf life-saving, you got so upset. I went, oh, okay. Because you have to choose your challenge as well. But, no, there was some really huge research study done, like massive one over many, many, many years. Well, no, actually it was just heaps of people that had reached 100 years old, and they had to fit all these other criteria for that they'd led a really long and successful life, and then they broke down what they all had in common to sort of try and find the secret to the successful and long and happy life. And what they discovered was really interesting, and it isn't talked about very often, which is that what's really important to our health and to our longevity is regularly challenging ourselves, or having people around us that challenge us in a way that helps us grow, but where we also don't fail too often.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's really the challenge of being a good parent. And that's where the gap finder and this developmental gap work is a lot deeper than what it probably seems on the surface. Oh, okay, we just got to find the things that we don't know how to do yet, and we have to fill them in. But having somebody in your life who cares about you enough to challenge you just enough that it helps you grow, but in ways that take stress off you, and that also are things that you are going to be able to succeed at.
Yes.
And that there is going to be rewards that come back to you that make you feel better about yourself. How better can we show our family that we love them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Than by doing that.
So many
by
rewards
being
in
somebody who does that. Being somebody that takes the time out to think, how do my kids need challenging at the moment? How does my partner need challenging at the moment? How do I need challenging at the moment? Where are those areas? And I mean, this can really cover all of the chapters that we've done so far. When there's stuff in there that might make you go, ooh, I'm scared of greeting people. Oh, I'm really worried about sitting down and trying to get a decision-making process going in our family. Yeesh. That sounds like a mosh pit. If there's anything along the way in all these movies that you've been seeing that makes you sort of uncomfortable and squirm a little bit, well, maybe you need to stop and think, maybe this is something that I could be challenging myself to do, and what would be the benefits of me learning this? Yeah,
100%.
Instead of always just focusing on our partner or our kids. You should be better at this. You should be better at... We have to... This really has to be worked on together. Yeah. And it's fun if you do it together, because then you can say, here's our blind spots. Hey, these are the areas we really need to work on because nobody's attending this fire. And there's other areas where we may compensate for each other, and it might be okay that we compensate for each other. I'm terrible at filling out forms. I'm not good at that. And that's really immature, of me. But I rely on you heaps for filling out forms, because you are really good at it. Yeah. And keeping
Thank you.
all the filing in order and all that stuff. And it's a really big skill that you've got.
Yeah, so nurturing the conditions for new learning is really important there. It sounds like what you're saying, that we can't be caught in a situation where we feel bad for not knowing things, or that we feel incomplete for not knowing things. Yeah. Again, we're talking about advertisers again.
Very well said.
They want us to feel incomplete. They want us to feel uncertain. Yeah. But not knowing something there's only a simple thing. You can just learn it. And learning goes on forever. Yeah. And we were always learning new skills, new talents. And it's not just learning for the sake of it. I think this is where, it's really powerful what you've put in this chapter, Kim, because it's really about knowing what the other people in your family need and giving them that incentive to want to learn it and not letting them fail too much. I want to just ask you about that too, Kim. You're saying that we shouldn't allow too many failures in learning. So explain that a little bit, because I think that's pretty important.
Unrealistic expectations on people are just really soul destroying. Really damaging. It's not a nice thing to do to your children. It's not a nice thing to do to yourself. It's not a nice thing to do to your partner, is to have unrealistic expectations. Yeah. And getting back to this advertising thing, this whole fairy tale romance thing that we've all been groomed into, and it's terrible because people now see choosing a partner a little bit like they choose to buy a new car or something. If it doesn't meet their expectations, well, chuck it out. Well, of course, just look for another one. It's just disposable. And sure, sometimes you really do need to break ties with people and move on. Help me get back to what was I saying about this?
You're saying about we shouldn't be setting people up for failure.
No, we shouldn't be setting people up for failure. We should be listening to what our family needs, which goes back to the DMP, not guessing, creating that trust between each other that we can talk about what's really on our mind. Just one person can't be head of the family.
Right.
Well, they can be head of the family if they take that as a leadership role where their job is to make sure that safe space is protected. Yeah. Then that's extremely important role for men in a family.
Yes.
And men do have an advantage in that role over women. They really do, because women will model off men, but men generally won't model off women. So if the father in a family takes that role of leadership, well, everybody in the family will model off him.
Yes.
If just mum takes that role, well, her daughters will model off her, but she'll have a harder time with her sons. So that means that men have a really important role to play in terms of leadership, but that leadership should involve them. They actually give time to every member of the family and they protect that space to make sure that everybody gets to express their needs.
Yeah, that protection role is the essential ingredient.
Yeah, because nobody is selfless enough and magical enough that they can spend the amount of time that you need to spend thinking about everybody else in the family and also being able to guess what everybody needs.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of regular meeting or regular format in place where those things are discussed, where we remember to sit down and talk about them. Because if that doesn't happen, what invariably happens is it's the weakest members of the family that end up neglected.
You're right. And then that just becomes a convenient place for all of the problems to be dumped on the weakest member. And that's exploitation. That's exploitation and truly tyrannical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, the idea of the list, the gap finder exercise is really important. Again, we've talked a lot about advertisers again, but I want to just bring it up one more time just for another point that I'd like to make.
Can't talk about it too much.
Well, I think so too. There's been a very conscious of the language that advertisers use, and one of them has become a phrase called a bucket list, and that's emerged over the last 10, 20 years, I guess. And they've used this term bucket list as, okay, what are all the consumer items you want? Okay, and then make that into a list, right? And so our program is almost the opposite of that. It's almost like saying, well, think about all the things that you haven't perhaps been able to develop yourself, and that tick those off. And as you go and build yourself to a place where you need to go. So the whole idea of a bucket list is very consumption orientated, and I think it hurts a lot of people. I see, we're involved with interpersonal things all the time. Kim, this is our work. And I see a lot of unhappy people who have got all of the happy snaps. Them in front of the Eiffel Tower, then at the Colosseum, cruising down the Nile, and all the photos.
Yeah.
They've done, the bucket list is complete. But they're empty inside, and they don't necessarily keep their families together because they haven't worked on what really matters. It doesn't matter if you've got a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower or not. What it matters is if you're able to keep developing as a person and provide. And if you're a man particularly, or a parent, you're providing that protected space for your children, or for your elderly parents for that matter. When you're an adult, that's a role that adults are required to provide that protection. So you're developing your gaps, if you have them, to be a better provider or a better protector is a reward that is tenfold reward. Being able to put it into a list is so powerful. I think we've talked about that in previous shows, Kim. Is it dopamine when you tip? Yeah. You get a small. So we know the advertisers use our dopamine and oxytocin levels to mess with our heads, but you can use it if you've got a list and you tick off. If you've got a gap find, you go, wow, I actually got my taxes done this year on time. Tick. That is a huge dopamine hit for you?
Yeah, yeah.
That's an easy one. I know there's harder ones than that.
There's a great exercise, and this isn't in the Love Safety Network book, so this is just an extra. This is excellent. Dallas always just thanks me so much for sharing this with her. She uses it with herself and with people all the time. Is if you're really despondent and you're really depressed and you're really just down in the dumps, like I think we all get it at some stage, a really great way to get yourself out of it is to just use the trick that Steve was just talking about, and just start giving yourself a tick for everything. Yeah. Look, I just took a breath. Tick. Look, I decided to take another breath, and I did. Tick. Oh, look, I decided to put my hand up in the air, and I did. Tick. Oh, look, and you take a step.
Tied my shoes.
Just step. Tick, tick, tick. I decided to take a step forward. Tick, tick, tick. And as silly as that sounds, you'll be amazed at how quickly you start feeling better.
I think there's a lot of research that backs that up too.
Absolutely, and how quickly you'll actually start feeling in control of yourself, and able to affect positive change in your life. Oh, look, there's my shoes sitting on the floor looking untidy. I'll just put them together. I'll just put them together so that they look a little bit neater. That's the example that Dallas always uses. Just this little tiny small thing, and then you go, tick, look, oh, that looks so much better. And I guess that goes back to the unrealistic expectations thing.
Yeah.
We've got to start from some place that's real.
Yeah.
Like going back to that example of not being able to read, right? Okay. Now, admitting that you don't know how to read might be really embarrassing and really difficult. But at the same time, where are you going to start from? If you're going to pretend that you can do something that you can't, if you're going to pretend that you can read when you can't, and you've got all these ways set up, you leave the newspaper on the table with your glasses on it. Then you have to wait for other people to sort of actually talk about what the headlines are in the paper, and then you listen to the radio, and then you pretend that you've read it. Just this silly example. So you're caught up in this whole confabulating narcissistic sort of hole of mirrors in your mind, where you're just sort of making up for this inadequacy that you feel like you've got in yourself. Well, you look at the gap finder, it's like, oh, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? Because you kid yourself and you're only kidding yourself. Yeah. But if you can sit down and admit something like that, oh, well, I can't really read. Okay, and then there's a bit of the exercise. What's the worst estimation of myself? I'm a dunce. I'm a complete idiot and I'm a dunce. Oh, what's the best estimation of myself? Oh, I'm actually a Rhodes Scholar in my dreams. And then you look at that gap in the middle, and then it just blows it all open.
Yeah, right.
It just blows it all open, and people panic, and people just go, okay, it's that gap in the middle that I'm scared of. Okay, so now let's quantify it. What do we need to do? And often the very first thing that you need to do to get you a really long way into the process is just admit that it's something that you don't know and you need to learn. Because as soon as you can actually just admit that to yourself, even better, admit it to other people, I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but I've got a problem with this and I need to do something about it. As hard as that is, most people find that really quite endearing.
It's something that people generally respond very well to, isn't it? Yeah, it's really very powerful to be able to, and that's something achievable, to be able to admit that you've got a problem.
And then you've got a starting point. Anyway, that's what I was getting to. Yeah. Then you've got a starting point. Yeah. You can build on truth. You can't build on lies.
Absolutely.
And that's why lies are so destructive. Because when you're going through the gap finder, if you've been lying about some of these things, that you're better at some of these things than you really are, or that you have skills in areas that you don't. We could sit here all day and tell stories that we've heard about this of just the most incredible things that people lie about.
Deception, just
incredible
awful.
Incredible deceptions that people will set up and lie about to their own partner, to their own family. Yeah. Okay, whatever. I'm not being moralistic about whether it's good or bad to lie. Well, I am. Sorry. But but I'm looking at that from a very pragmatic point of view, because you can't build on lies.
Absolutely.
You can't. If you're going to lie about where you're at developmentally, you're going to stay stuck there.
Yeah, right. That's right.
You are going to be stuck there. If you're lying about it, well, you're stuck there, right down there. And that stress is never going to go away until you could admit to yourself and other people, hey, I really actually need to do some work in that area.
Yeah, right. It's like walking out into thinner and thinner ice.
Yeah.
Really too, isn't it?
And then as soon as you do admit that you need help in that area, debt consolidation, maybe even closer to home than the reading. There's a lot of things out there that society puts these unrealistic expectations on us of all the things that we're meant to know. And again, it goes back to advertising. They put unrealistic expectations on you to feed your insecurity so that then you buy their stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know? And it's like, there is a way out of this. It's saying, you know what? I have social phobia and I really need to deal with that. I think I might sit down and work on what those steps are. What are those steps that I need to take to actually start dealing with this? Hey, I have a problem with my reading. I've got a problem with not knowing how to trust other people or connect deeply with other people. You know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
As soon as you're able to actually just admit that to yourself, no matter how bad it is, well, then you're at a starting point where you can actually start building from.
That's so powerful. You know, I think we can't build on falsities. I'm just going to give a very quick anecdote. There was once an employment opportunity. It was a job that was advertised, and it was for a real estate agent. And one of the requirements was that you must own a late model car. And I was thinking about it at the time, and I think I didn't have a late model car at the time, and nor did I want to become a real estate agent. But I was just reading it with interest, and I thought, well, they're not really looking for somebody that has any real estate experience. They're looking for somebody that has a late model car and that is creating the impression that they're successful at what they're doing before they've even started doing what they're doing. So there's this it's not true that this person, they just wanted to create the impression that this person was successful. A lot of jobs, you're expected to have a very expensive watch. You're expected to have a late model car. You're expected to have very nice threads in order to get that job. But often that's not reflective of the situation you're in. The situation is you're just battling to pay the rent or the mortgage. And so there's all sorts of traps out there that feed into this idea that we can fake it. That we must fake it in order to make it. Now that's different from learning to fill the gaps. I mean, it's more about creating a false impression. There's two different lines there. You can take this.
Two different ways how to fake it to make it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If you're faking it to make it, and you're actually putting
doing the work,
real genuine skills in place.
That's right.
Because you're learning how to greet people. You're learning how to balance power. You're learning about what your emotions
building the
mean.
skills.
You know, you're putting a conflict resolution process in place in your family. You're learning how to stand up for yourself. Yeah. Okay. Fake it till you make it in that way.
Is fantastic, because as you're filling your gaps then.
Yeah.
You're actually filling your developmental gaps.
Yeah.
But faking it to make it by purchasing things on credit.
Yeah.
Is a ridiculous
pretending
way.
that you're already more successful than you are.
Is creating a bigger gap.
Yeah.
For the future.
And it's like, and society is waking up to this.
Yeah.
Our youngest son is 19, and him and his friends are really waking up to this.
Yep.
They're just going, the whole point of having the flash car is meant to be that you got it because you were successful
and achieved something.
And you achieved something.
Right.
And so they're starting to really get that. You know, I hear them talking about it. They say no, and you know, I'm really proud that our son's actually really led the charge with a lot of his friends saying, no, it's actually really quite okay to shop at Target and Kmart because the clothes are really cheap and they're fine. They're just fine.
And because we're on a budget, we got to
shop accordingly. We got to shop accordingly. And this is, you know, he grew up with a lot of kids whose parents were probably wealthier than us. And
it's an understatement.
And it's taken a while for him to now Now he says, no, the man makes the clothes.
Yeah, nice one.
He says, no, the man makes the clothes.
So we've covered the 4 pillars of the love safety. This is the very last one. So developmental gap work. It's probably one of the most important, but they're all important, and we've said that in the previous videos. They're all important.
But you can't jump into this one without having to put the other stuff in place,
Absolutely.
because otherwise you're going to jump into it and you're just going to start finger pointing.
Absolutely. Without having a great relationship without having a good process of how you're going to relate this information back and forth with your loved ones, without being able to attach to them and build trust, without being able to balance that power, everything, the developmental gap work's they're just words, unless you can really get the rubber to the road with this.
Get the 4 pillars in place.
We're really enjoying talking to you guys again. We're going to be talking more shortly. The Love Safety Net workbook, if you need more information, we're not hard to find online. I'm Steve Cooper. This is Kim Cooper. Thanks for being with us. Love Safety Net
Join
workbook.
our members area, please. Come and be part of this. Come and help, because we're still learning this. We've all got to learn this together. If you believe in what we're talking about, if you think this is a good idea, come be part of our consensus group. Come be part of this, and let's help build stronger families.
Let's do that. Thank you very much, everybody.